Thanks for joining us today. My name is Jackie Garlock. I'm with the Community Technical Assistance Center, and I'm delighted to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Understanding and Addressing Childhood Aggressive Behavior. Before we get started, I'm going to take a moment to just orient everyone so we all know how to participate in today's event. As you can see, we're offering continuing education for today's event. It's 1.5 units. This is just for the live viewing, and it's for eligible counselors and social workers. If you are eligible to receive CE credits, you'll get an email in 2 to 3 days that will provide you with all of the information that you need to get your CE credits. As you can see here, you must be present for at least 75% of the offering. You'll all notice that you're placed on mute when you joined the webinar. You can activate closed captions if that is helpful. You can see a link at the top of the page that will allow you to do that. If you are encountering any technical issues during our presentation today, please chat to either myself or the CTAC admin, which is our host, my colleague Leslie, and one of us will endeavor to help you. Please use the chat throughout the presentation today to submit any questions that you have. You can use that. We're going to have a Q&A at the end of today's presentation. But we really encourage you to enter your questions throughout the presentation. You'll notice when you sign off that there is a brief feedback survey that will pop up on your screen. We really hope that you will take the time to let us know if you have any suggestions for topics that you'd like us to cover. The recording and presentation will be posted on the CTAC website with 2 to 3 business days. And you can see on the next slide, just some more information about the CE hours. I see someone already asking in the chat. So again, you'll get that email in 2 to 3 days that will allow you to access the CEs. You'll go online to the Silver CE portal and you'll register if you have not already registered, or you'll create an account, and then it'll take you through some steps that will allow you to access your certificate of completion. I'm delighted to introduce our presenter for today. Thank you so much, Dr. Ross Greene. Dr. Greene is a clinical psychologist and the originator of the collaborative and proactive solutions model, sometimes referred to as CPS, and the author of a number of books on child behavior, including The Explosive Child, Lost at School, Lost and Found, and Raising Human Beings. Dr. Greene served on the faculty at Harvard Medical School for over 20 years and is the founding director of the nonprofit Lives in the Balance, and he consults extensively, both nationally and internationally, to families, schools, mental health providers, and facilities. His research has been funded by NIH, the U.S. Department of Education, and others, and we're so honored that he is taking the time to be here with us today. So Dr. Greene, welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to do this. Hello, everybody. Good to be with you this afternoon. We're going to start off here with a question. What are the greatest challenges you face in working with the families of kids with aggressive or challenging behaviors? I know a lot of the challenges I face. I'm assuming you all face a lot of the same challenges, but if you don't mind, type some of your responses into the chat. What's making it hard? And I'm going to read them as they come in. Parents' emotional regulation. We'll be talking about that. Lack of coping skills. We'll be talking about that. Having parents see their part in the behaviors of concern. That is huge. One person only wrote parents. Boxing children into a corner. Inconsistent follow-up. Unwilling to continue the work at home that we are doing, breakdowns when trying to communicate. I love this. What your pain is my pain. Lowering the anger level so that people can actually talk to each other. Managing the school's response. We probably won't be talking very much about that today. Parents saying that nothing works. Well, there's some chance they haven't tried what you're going to be hearing about today. parents' unwillingness to engage in treatment, caregiver burnout, parents wanting us to fix the kid, denial, wanting the problem to be fixed as soon as possible. Boy, it sounds like changing the way they talk to the kid. Intergenerational trauma. Sounds like you all are working with the very same people that I am working with. Thank you for all of your responses. Parents throwing the problem at the clinician and saying it's your problem now. Cultural misunderstandings about what's not acceptable behavior in children. All outstanding. And all make any form of intervention much more difficult. So I'm going to jump in here. And compassion fatigue, I'm just scrolling through here. Some of you are still poverty. Some of you are still typing things in. Kim is saying, geez, can we blame the parents anymore? Jake is saying, what is normal development versus what or not? What is not? Outstanding. Stop typing. I'm not going to read anymore. Thank you for all of that. Those are the challenges of working with difficult families, made more difficult when a kid is exhibiting aggressive behavior. Now, you are soon going to hear me say that I don't view aggressive behavior any differently than I view other concerning behaviors. So although the official topic for today is aggressive behavior, any concerning behavior, and that tends to be how I refer to it, as concerning, because there are behaviors that aren't aggressive and aren't what we might call big, that are still very important for us to pay attention to, even if they're not aggressive, even if they're not big concerning behaviors. We'll be talking about that soon. Let's talk about it now. First of all, what's the scope of this problem? Well, according to the DSM, and by the way, I don't do much based on the DSM at all. You all should feel free to use it. I don't open my DSM almost ever. Oppositional defiant disorder, which is probably the disorder that comes closest to what we're talking about here, occurs in about 15 to 20% of the population of children. So if we wanted to be diagnostic about it, the scope of the problem is 15 to 20%. If we acknowledge the fact that we all have bad moments, then the scope of the problem is 100%, even if not all of us are aggressive in the way we are communicating something very important. What does aggression and other forms of concerning behavior communicate? That is the most important thing for us to cover right off the bat here. The behavior communicates that there's an expectation the kid is having difficulty meeting. I'm going to let that settle in for a second. We've all heard the cliche, all behavior is communication. What is concerning behavior communicating? Aggression included. That there's an expectation a kid is having difficulty meeting. And that's not just specific to kids, that's specific to all human beings. In that respect, aggression and other concerning behaviors are best viewed as what we might call the frustration response, the stress response. And that's how I view concerning behavior, aggression included. It's telling us something. It's telling us that there's an expectation a kid is having difficulty meeting, or what in the collaborative and proactive solutions model we refer to as an unsolved problem. Any expectation a kid is having difficulty reliably meeting, we refer to in this model as an unsolved problem. By the way, also referred to as a problem that has yet to be solved. Also referred to as a problem waiting to be solved. How do we know the problem is still waiting to be solved because it's still causing concerning behavior? It's only unsolved problems that cause concerning behavior. Solved problems don't. And in general, kids come into treatment as the identified patient. We'll talk about that in a second. And that identified patient has quite a number of unsolved problems. That's because if all we're focused on is the kid's concerning behavior, the problems that are causing that behavior will remain unsolved. The behavior itself is not the unsolved problem. The behavior is the frustration response. So you might be wondering, what are we talking about here? What counts as an unsolved problem? Any expectation that is being placed on the kid that the kid is having difficulty reliably meeting. I'm just going to give you a few. In no particular order of severity, by the way. Severity, most people, when they're talking about severity, they're talking about the severity of the kid's frustration response. I don't think of unsolved problems as being more or less severe than another. It's going to be the same process by which we go about solving them. So what might some unsolved problems be at home? I know that most of you are thinking about home unsolved problems here, and families could be things as mundane as difficulty brushing teeth before going to bed at night, difficulty turning off the Xbox to come in for dinner, difficulty turning off the Xbox to go to bed at night, difficulty turning off the Xbox to engage in any other much more meaningful aspect of living, difficulty being in bed by 9 p.m. with the lights and electronics off, difficulty waking up at 6:30 a.m. to get ready for school in the morning, difficulty going to school, difficulty going to school on time. I could go on forever. All unsolved problems that could set in motion concerning behavior when a kid is having difficulty meeting them. Now, just for a second here, let's talk about the behavior. As you should already be noticing, the behavior is not the most important part in this model. In other models, the behavior is not only the most important part, it's the only part. In this model, it's really not something we're paying very close attention to. We get it. Certain behaviors can be very scary and disruptive and dangerous. But no matter how scary, disruptive, or dangerous the behavior is, it's still the frustration response. So along those lines, I tend to break concerning behaviors down into two categories, lucky and unlucky. And let me first acknowledge that those are artificial categories, but I use them to make a very important point, which will become apparent momentarily. What are lucky ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting a particular expectation? I'm not going to be exhaustive here, but whining, pouting, sulking, withdrawing, crying. Why are those ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations lucky? Those ways aren't going to get you popped into timeout, aren't going to get you grounded. If we were talking about schools, aren't going to get you held in from recess, held after school, detention, suspension, expulsion, school and home, not going to get you hit, school and home, not going to get you pinned to the ground in what's known as a restraint, not going to get you thrown into a locked or blocked closet-sized room, what's known as a seclusion. But best of all, those lucky ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations are highly likely to elicit empathy, nurturance, support from your caregivers. Not so for the unlucky variety, and that's the variety of kid I've been working with for well over 40 years now, in one way or another. What are unlucky ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations? You already know, but here's a sampling. Screaming, swearing, hitting, spitting, kicking, biting, throwing, destroying, running. There's worse. Why are those ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations unlucky? Those ways are going to get you popped into timeout, grounded, held in from recess, held after school, detention, suspension, expulsion, hit, pinned, thrown. But worst of all, those unlucky ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations are far less likely to elicit empathy, nurturance, support from your caregivers. Even though the field of developmental psychopathology has been telling us for a very long time, this is important, that whether your concerning behavior is lucky or unlucky, it is communicating the exact same thing. There's an expectation the kid is having difficulty meeting. And so, just as an exercise, straight up until 3:30, let's spend the next hour and a quarter thinking about unsolved problems, expectations kids are having difficulty meeting, rather than the behaviors that are being caused by those unsolved problems. That's going to move us away from being in the behavior modification business and into the problem-solving business. Many caregivers that I work with have worked with clinicians previously, and almost the only thing they got as intervention was behavior modification. And in many instances, they're telling me that that's all they got. And they're also telling me nothing worked. Okay. There's an excellent chance they haven't done what I'm about to describe yet. For the next hour and a quarter, we're thinking about the problems that are causing concerning behavior and solving them, rather than the behaviors that are being caused by those problems and modifying them. All right, give me an hour and a quarter. We'll see where we're at the end. Now, depending on how fast I go through these slides, I may have time to show you a video of a bit of the process being done. Depends how fast I go. I'm actually much more interested in answering your questions than I am in showing you a video. The reason for that is that there are a boatload of videos of this model being done on the website of my nonprofit, Lives in the Balance. So if we're going to sacrifice one over the other, I'd rather answer your questions than show you videos that I know you can see elsewhere. But here's an interesting slide. It shows you that there's a few different factors in play here. We are accustomed to having the kid be the identified patient. In the CPS model, the family is the identified patient. I don't know any kid who likes being identified as the identified patient. It's actually not conducive to having kids participate in treatment to give them the impression, either explicitly or implicitly, that they're the one with the problem. So frequently, very early in treatment, I am making it clear that the kid is not the identified patient. If I say this at all, I'm saying that the family, by the way, the parent is not the identified patient either. And that, by the way, another form of treatment has made it out to be the parents who are passive, permissive, inconsistent, non-contingent, inept disciplinarians. That's not this model either. This model has paid more attention to what the research has been telling us about kids with concerning behaviors for the last 40 to 50 years, but that doesn't mean we're going to swing the pendulum in the exact opposite direction and have this be all about the kid. This is about kid and caregiver. A lot of it is about the expectations that are being placed on the kid and whether a kid has the capacity to meet those expectations. So, expectations are a huge part of this model, as you've already heard. It is when kids and other human beings, this is true of all of us, have difficulty meeting certain expectations, that's when concerning behavior tends to come into play. All right, so in this form of treatment, what are some things we can do differently that will help? Well, you've already heard about one of them, and that is to make this very big shift. By the way, there is some chance, because I'm doing this from my home office today, that you will hear a dog bark at some point along the way. That's because my very barky dog is laying in my office right now. And if she hears something that intrigues her, she will bark. Don't worry, it won't last for long. But just to give you the full context through which this is occurring today, dog in home office, I don't know. The likelihood of her going for the next hour and 6 minutes without barking, slim and none, but we may luck out. You've already heard about a very big shift that comes into play when we are using this model. We are helping caregivers focus less on concerning behaviors and trying to modify them, and more on the problems that are causing those behaviors and solving them. We want caregivers to recognize, number one, that they are in the problem-solving business in this model. Number two, that if all we do is modify a kid's behavior, the problems that are causing that behavior will remain unsolved. That's big. They are a problem solver in this model, not a behavior modifier. And by the way, thing number three we want them to appreciate, if they care about the research, you may care more about the research than they do, is that what the research tells us about this evidence-based model, collaborative and proactive solutions, is that when you are implementing this model, a kid's behavior is going to improve every bit as much as it would have if all people were doing was trying to modify the kid's behavior. So there is nothing lost there. Of course, if all we're doing is modifying the kid's concerning behavior, the problems that are causing that behavior remain unsolved. Are behavior modification strategies evidence-based as well? Yes, they are. But why do I not use behavior modification strategies anymore, even though that's how I was originally trained? Number one, I don't need them. Number two, it's not enough to simply improve a kid's behavior if the problems that are causing that behavior remain unsolved. So the rest of this slide, we've already covered just in the beginning. Key major shift, number one, let's us, and then let's help the caregivers. Stop focusing so much on a kid's concerning behavior and start focusing on solving the problems that are causing that behavior. Here's things that can help number two. This is huge. A lot of concerning behaviors are caused when expectations are placed on kids. This is so big that we already know they cannot meet. I'll repeat that. A lot of concerning behaviors are caused when we're placing expectations on kids we already know they can't meet. Now, why would we place expectations on a kid that we already know they can't meet? I can think of a few reasons. We might think it's important that the kid meet the expectation, even if we know they can't yet meet it. We might be using other kids as our reference point for this kid. That's a bad reference point. We might be thinking about what the kid's going to be like 15 years from now. Excuse me. And that it's going to be important for the kid to meet the expectation 15 years from now. So we might as well get a jump start on it. But the bottom line is a very important role for the clinician to play in this model is to point out what might be the obvious to caregivers who may not have seen it as being so obvious for any variety of reasons. I don't think your kid can meet that expectation yet. Plus, we'll talk about this a little bit more soon. There's a lot of expectations your kid is having difficulty meeting, and we're not going to be able to meet them all at once. So we're not going to be able to solve those problems all at once. Some problems we're going to have to put on hold for now. either because we got bigger fish to fry, or because we don't think that this kid can even meet this expectation, at least in this point in their development. So expectation management is a huge aspect of this model, because quite frankly, there's no point in putting expectations on kids if we already know the kid cannot meet that expectation. Now, there is the mentality out there that if a kid is having difficulty meeting an expectation, it must be that they just aren't motivated enough. You want to get rid of that mentality as quickly as possible. I promise you, there are many expectations I will never meet, no matter how much you try to motivate me. So, a big part of this model is helping caregivers manage their expectations so that we're not putting expectations on a kid that they can't already meet, and so that we are not working on so many things at once that we will end up solving nothing at all. That is huge. So when I get a family in and they are very overreactive and what we might call coming in hot, and you all know what I'm talking about. They're very overreactive. This is not a particularly stable family. They're coming in hot. Probably the first thing I do before they hear about any other aspect of this model is I'm going to get them to get rid of a lot of their expectations, because what I'm often saying to them is stabilizing comes before anything else. And disagreements and conflict in your family are the most detrimental thing to your family right now. Let's chill things out, start with a clean slate, and build up from there. Big, especially for families that are coming in hot. Here's another thing that'll help. Let's identify those problems. This is huge. Let's help parents and other caregivers identify all of the expectations this kid is having difficulty reliably meeting. In kids who've been exhibiting concerning behavior for a very long time, that's going to be a long list. And now we see the mountain that lies before us. There's an excellent chance no clinician has ever done this for them before. That's because we've been too busy talking about the kid's behavior and too busy trying to modify it. That's not what we're talking about in this model. Now, if you said to me, you mean, Ross, you don't spend any time listening to caregivers talk about their kids' behavior? I might spend 2 minutes in the first session hearing about the kids' concerning behavior, just so I get a sense for severity, and also so I can let caregivers know that I feel their pain. But very rapidly, I'm moving us on to the problems that are causing those concerning behaviors. And we're making a list. And I'll show you how we're going to make the list in a few minutes. We're making a list. That's our agenda in this model of care. We are in the problem-solving business. These are the problems that need to be solved. Don't be surprised if this kid has 30 or 40 different unsolved problems just in the home setting. 30 or 40 expectations they're having difficulty meeting. The first thing people are going to feel, perhaps you included as the clinician, is overwhelmed. Whew. That's a big pile. The good news is, and you want to tell caregivers this, we're not going to have to solve all of them, because some are going to solve by solving others. And we're never going to be working on more than 3 unsolved problems at any particular point in time. Any more than 3, we're going to get diminishing returns. We're working on too much. 3. Took a long time for that pile to accumulate. It's going to take a little while for us to chip our way through it. Now we're ready for things that can help number 3. If we're going to be in the problem-solving business, we got to think about what kind of problem solver we want to be. And in this model, true to the name of the model, you are solving problems collaboratively, not unilaterally. That means that the kid is going to be fully engaged in and an indispensable part of the problem-solving process. Now, that's going to take some doing. First of all, a lot of us weren't raised that way. A lot of us clinicians weren't raised that way, so it takes a little bit of getting used to for us. And a lot of parents weren't raised that way, so it's going to take some getting used to for them. And so along the way, we may have to point out to them that the evidence is before us. The reason they are in treatment, the reason they have sought out your help, is because solving problems unilaterally has not been working, and in fact, may be making things worse. So, as you might expect, adult-imposed consequences are not part of this model either. A very important mantra in this model is ask the kid. The kid is our number one source of information on what's making it hard for them to meet a particular expectation. Another ask the kid part of this model is that the kid is going to be an indispensable part of coming up with a solution. We'll talk about solutions pretty soon. This is an ask the kid model, not a tell the kid what to do model. Do caregivers still have expectations? Yes. How are we dealing with unmet expectations? Collaboratively, not unilaterally. Now, the biggest question I get about that relates to accountability, because for a very long time, people have been defining accountability, holding a kid accountable, as using consequences, which has never made any sense to me. When you are consequencing a kid, the kid is not engaged in the process. There's no thinking. There's no process. My definition of accountability: engage the kid in the process of solving the problems that are causing their concerning behavior. That's accountability. Interesting, eh? But you may help. First of all, you may have to get used to that idea yourself. Secondly, you may have to help caregivers get used to that idea. A lot of caregivers have been trained to be obsessed with compliance and obsessed with consequences at ensuring compliance, and that's not this model. This model is about collaboration, not compliance. Collaboration, not consequences. Huge. All right. First of all, I want to thank Jackie for the artwork. I tend not to be a particularly artsy slide creator, but that hourglass is straight from Jackie's help. This next one's huge. We have got to get these families out of the heat of the moment, which means we have to help them start solving these problems proactively rather than the heat of the moment, reactively. Huge. Now that's how we're going to get them there. Well, if we are helping them, and once again, I'll teach you how to do this in a few minutes, or at least show you, if we're going to help them identify all of the expectations that their child is having difficulty meeting, then all of those unsolved problems become predictable and can therefore be solved proactively. So we want to help families get out of the business of waiting for the unsolved problem to pop up yet again before they intervene. Nope, unsolved problems don't pop up. The likelihood is that about 99.9% of the unsolved problems this family is dealing with come up over and over and over again, and the fact that they continue to come up over and over again tells us that those problems are still unsolved, and though no matter what intervention they've applied up till now, probably mostly consequences, they haven't solved any of those problems. And that's because consequences are really behavior modification strategies, not problem-solving strategies. So if we are going to respond early instead of late, and this is more for schools than for families, there are a lot of interventions that won't make a whole lot of sense. Very common interventions that are late. And the other big mantra of this model is don't be late. These are things we do, especially in education settings, with the best of intentions, without realizing that they're late. These days, it has become very popular to feel like it's very important for a kid to know how to ask for help. And by the way, I have no problem with teaching kids to ask for help. I just think we're overdoing it. By the time the kid is asking for help, there's an unsolved problem that is already in play that they're asking for help for. Therefore, asking for help is late. Now, I think asking for help is a wonderful self-advocacy skill, a good thing for a kid to know how to do, but wouldn't we all be a whole lot further ahead in the game if we were proactively identifying and solving the problems that the kid was asking for help for in the first place, rather than having the kid perpetually ask for help? Don't be late. Thanks to PBIS and responsive classroom, we are giving kids a lot of breaks these days. When do kids get a break at school? When they're just beginning to struggle with a particular task. So taking a break is late. The kid is already struggling with a particular academic task, and taking a break doesn't solve any of the problems that are causing a kid to take a break in the first place, which explains why I've worked with kids who are getting 20, 30 breaks a day. As I've always said, 20 to 30 breaks on Monday simply guarantees 20 to 30 breaks on Tuesday, because taking a break, I've already said this, doesn't solve any problems. Taking a break is late. Calming corners, late. When do kids access the calming corner? When they're not calm. When are they not calm? When they're having difficulty meeting a particular expectation. Going to the calming corner is late. And calming corners don't solve any of the problems that are causing a kid to access the calming corner in the first place. Calming, which explains why I've worked with kids who are going to the calming corner 15, 20 times a day. 15, 20 calming corners on Tuesday just guarantees 15 to 20 calming corners on Wednesday. And now you know why. Here's the controversial one, but if people hear me out, I don't think it's controversial anymore. Coping strategies. I have no problem with coping strategies. Coping strategies are great. The ones we're teaching kids are the ones I sometimes wonder about. I find that we are primarily teaching kids what to do as a coping strategy once they're already frustrated. We teach them to take deep breaths. We teach them to count to 10. We teach them to figure out what color they are: red, yellow, green, blue. Late, 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 late. We teach adults to co-regulate. Late. Wouldn't we be a whole lot better off identifying and solving the problems that are causing the kid frustration in the first place, instead of spending so much time and effort teaching them to do once they're frustrated? Just one man's thought. You know my answer. De-escalating, late. Detention, suspension, expulsion, paddling, grounding, timeout, late. In this model, we're helping caregivers get into the problem-solving business, not the behavior modification business, and not the what should we do once it's already late business. If you take nothing away from this talk, here are the two things I hope you remember. Ask the kid. Don't be late. I sit in a lot of meetings. Whenever I'm sitting in a meeting and caregivers are hypothesizing about how a kid got to be this way, or why the kid is having difficulty meeting a particular expectation, I never hesitate to ask the following question. Have y'all asked the kid yet? because the kid's going to be your number one source of information on what's making them hard, what's making it hard for the kid to meet this expectation. And if I'm hearing about a lot of what should we do when, as in what should we do when the kid loses control? What should we do when the kid starts throwing things? You know, I'm going to ask, well, I guess y'all could spend a lot of time talking about that, but what I want to know is what's the kid losing it over and how we're going to solve those problems so the kid doesn't keep losing it over those things. That is huge. That everything I've covered so far are the things that started changing how I help these kids and these families and their educators and their staff in prisons and inpatient psychiatry units and residential facilities. These are the changes. These are the things that help. For many parents, these are going to be very big shifts and very big changes in practice. That's what we're there for. Here's another thing that can help. We need to help people change their lenses. We need to help people change their vocabulary. The mantra of this model is 6 little words. And no matter where I am privileged enough to speak all over the world, it is these 6 little words that people tell me more often than any other part of this model is what really got their heads turned around. Kids do well if they can. The belief that if this kid could do well, this kid would do well, and that if this kid isn't doing well, something must be getting in the kid's way. What's getting in the kid's way? Well, expectations that they're having difficulty meeting. And as we shall talk about shortly, especially in the case of kids who communicate that through unlucky behavior, the skills to handle problems and frustrations adaptively. Why is that earth-shattering for many people? Because there's another much more popular alternative mentality that's been floating around out there for a very long time called kids do well if they wanna. Kids do well if they can, and kids do well if they wanna are 2 completely different mentalities, and they have completely different implications for how we're thinking about this kid and what we're doing with this kid collaboratively or to this kid unilaterally to try to help this kid. Let's think about kids do well if they wanna briefly, because there are a lot of things you don't say anymore if you have a kids do well if they can mentality. Now, if you have a kids do well if they wanna mentality, then the reason you think the kid isn't doing well by virtue of your mentality is that the kid doesn't wanna do well. And full disclosure, that a very long time ago is how I was trained to think. I haven't been thinking that way for a very long time. That's because very early on in the process, I started asking myself a very important question. Why would the kid not want to do well? Well, here's the answers I was given way back when. Doing poorly is working out better for the kid than doing well would. Doing poorly is working out better for the kid than doing well would? How? Well, you know, the concepts like secondary gain and competing contingencies. Could you put that in English? The kid is seeking attention by doing poorly. The kid is manipulating us by doing poorly. The kid is coercing us into capitulating to his wishes by doing poorly. The kid is unmotivated. That's why they're doing poorly. The kid is testing limits. That's why they're doing poorly. I haven't said or believed any of these things in over 35 years. And let me explain why. I can't go through all of them, but let me go through a few of them. Why would I not say attention seeking? Because if you think a kid is seeking attention through their concerning behavior, then you're basically saying that the kid doesn't have the skills to seek attention in a more adaptive fashion. You're basically saying the kid has the skills to seek attention the right way, but is choosing to seek attention the wrong way because it's making their life go better. I got to tell you, I've never seen it. I've never seen it. I'm over 2,000 kids with concerning behaviors in at this point. I have yet to come across a kid who had the skills to seek attention the right way and was choosing to seek attention the wrong way because it was making the kid's life go better. Plus, this is big. What very popular intervention is going to make perfect sense if you believe that a kid's concerning behaviors for the purpose of seeking attention? Ignore the kid. Planned ignoring. So as to withdraw all of the attention, all of the reinforcement from the kid's concerning behavior. What if you're wrong? What if the kid's concerning behavior is not for the purpose of seeking attention, but is instead simply the means by which the kid is communicating that there's an expectation they're having difficulty meeting? You don't want to ignore that. Plus, if we listen to some of the voices of the neurodivergent community, we will hear neurodivergent adults who experienced planned ignoring in childhood. We will hear them telling us that they experienced that planned ignoring as harmful. And you know what? That makes sense. You'll hear me say this a few more times. If there's another way for us to accomplish whatever we think we're accomplishing with planned ignoring without doing harm, we should do it. You'll hear them telling us they experienced sticker charts as harmful. If we listen, we'll hear them telling us that they were identified at very early ages as the kid who didn't get the sticker. Once again, if there's another way for us to accomplish whatever we think we're accomplishing with stickers in a way that doesn't cause harm, we should do it. Let's jump down to unmotivated. Do you know I would never characterize anybody as unmotivated? Ever? Why not? Because here's what I've learned. The minute we take a closer look, what skills is this kid struggling with? What expectations is this kid having difficulty meeting? We find that unmotivated doesn't even come close to capturing what's really going on with this kid. The trick is to take a closer look. And I'm going to introduce you to an instrument shortly to help you do that. Perfect timing. Here's another thing that can help. It's an instrument called the Assessment of Lagging Skills and Unsolved Problems. In about 2 weeks, we're going to put out a revised assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems. It will be called the Assessment of Skills and Unsolved Problems. It's not quite ready for prime time yet because there's a bunch of things we need to change to put that instrument out there, even though the instrument didn't change that much. Why did we take the word lagging out? Quite frankly, in responsiveness to the neurodivergent community, which has made it quite clear to us and good for them. They don't like to feel like they're lagging anything, and they really don't love having a neurotypical reference point or any hint of a neurotypical reference point. I agree with them. So moving forward, it will be the Assessment of Skills and Unsolved Problem, the ALSUP 2024. I know that Jackie put the link to the existing ALSUP in the chat at the very beginning, so you can find it. What does I'll still call it the ALSUP for now. What does it help us do? It helps us identify these skills that kids are struggling with that are making it very hard for them to respond adaptively to life's problems and frustrations, and it's going to help us identify all of the expectations this kid is having difficulty reliably meeting. It is not going to help us identify a kid's concerning behaviors. I find that people already know what a kid's concerning behaviors are, so we do not have to spend any time in our meetings with families identifying that. That's getting some context for the kid's frustration response, but it's helping people move on to the problems that are causing that frustration response. So here it is, what it looks like now, the ALSUP 2020. You'll notice that it has two sections. And by the way, it is available on the Lives in the Balance website in an editable, fillable format so that people can type instead of write and save and share electronically. The ASUP 2024 will be available in the same editable, fillable format. By the way, it's free, so you don't have to worry about buying anything. This is used as a discussion guide in often, unless the family's coming in super hot, families that we work with when we're implementing this model. Yes, we still ask the question, tell us what brings you in today. And we're likely to hear about a lot of concerning behaviors. And once again, we want them to know we feel their pain, but as rapidly as possible, we want to move on to what the research tells us is why kids with concerning behaviors exhibit concerning behaviors. And the research tells us that it's because they're lacking the skills to respond more adaptively. So here is a list of 18 skills frequently found lacking. Once again, we're getting rid of that word. Let me put it the right way. Skills that kids are struggling with when kids are having difficulty responding adaptively to life's problems and frustrations. Now, there's 18 of them on the ALSUP. I think we've reduced the number a little bit on the revised ASUP. But the skills that I'm usually mentioning to people in very general terms before we get into the ALSUP are the following. These are the global skills: flexibility, adaptability, frustration tolerance, problem solving, emotion regulation. That's what I want them knowing about their kid, despite all the wonderful things about their kid, many of which they may not be particularly in touch with. Despite all of the kid's strengths, they were blessed with a kid who was struggling with certain developmental skills: flexibility, adaptability, frustration tolerance, problem solving, emotion regulation. That's what helps us understand why this kid is responding so poorly to life's problems and frustrations, and what a critical lens shift that is, both for clinicians and for the caregivers they're working with. Because notice the word that's missing so far: motivation. Kids are not exhibiting concerning behaviors because they're poorly motivated, even though that is a very popular belief. By the way, that very popular belief is going to lead people to try to give kids the incentive to do well. But if a kid is struggling with certain skills, then giving them the incentive to do well may actually not make any sense at all, and may explain why a lot of caregivers are coming into treatment, telling us that nothing has worked. We're going to do the skills in the top section first. Then we're going to turn our attention to identifying every single expectation this kid is having difficulty reliably meeting. Even if the kid can meet the expectation sometimes and not others, it's still an unsolved problem. If you're working with a family, you want to use the prompts that are in that home clinic section. They're in the unsolved problems part of the ALSUP. If you're working with a school or facility, you're going to use the prompts in the school facility part of the unsolved problems section of the ALSUP. Slightly different prompts. It is those prompts that are going to help caregivers think of every single expectation this kid is having difficulty reliably meeting. Not the behaviors caused by those unmet expectations, the unmet expectations that are causing those behaviors. By the way, you've probably heard this many times when you the number one caregiver explanation for why a kid can meet an expectation sometimes and not others goes something like this. He can do it when he wants to. He can do it when he wants to is proof positive that there's somebody very important we haven't yet asked about what's making it hard for a kid to meet this expectation. Ask the kid. That's not what they're going to say. He can meet it when he wants to is a motivational explanation. This is assessment gold. I could spend another 2 hours on this. The good news is, well, first of all, we don't have time, but the good news is there is an instructional video on the Lives in the Balance website, about 30 minutes long, to teach caregivers how to use the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems. If you learn how to use this instrument, you'll know exactly how to use its replacement in about 2 weeks. And about a 30-minute video showing me using it with 3 educators. It doesn't look any different with parents, figuring out a kid's lagging skills and unsolved problems. Here's what we always say. Once you know a kid's lagging skills and unsolved problems, what we call the information that's been missing, this is a very predictable kid, and intervention can be almost exclusively proactive. I kid you not, this is assessment gold, an integral part of changing caregivers' lenses, of making the entire process proactive, and helping them focus on problems, not behaviors. Huge. Free, but huge. All right. Here's another thing that's going to help. The next step after we finish the ALSUP is to help these caregivers get good at Plan B. Now, what's Plan B? For the unfamiliar, what I did a long time ago was I identified, just to make life easy, 3 options for handling unsolved problems, and they are called Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C. What I did here is I've taken the many different ways in which adults handle unsolved problems with kids, and I've reduced them to 3 basic options, A, B, C. It's a very nice shorthand for helping caregivers think about how they're handling unsolved problems now and how they might choose to handle unsolved problems instead. Plan C. Plan C is where we're putting a particular expectation on hold, at least for now. Now, the first thing many caregivers and clinicians are going to think, if they were trained the way I was, when they hear put an expectation on hold for now is, you mean giving in? Nope, there's no giving in the entire model. Giving up? No, there's no giving up in the entire model. Prioritizing? Yes, there is prioritizing in this model. Plan C is what we are doing consciously, deliberately, and proactively, where we are helping caregivers decide we're not going to try to solve that one right now. We got bigger fish to fry, because we know that if they try to solve everything at once, they will end up solving nothing at all. In the case of the families that are coming in hot, Plan C is also big because it helps put out the flames rather quickly and immediately. As I said earlier, what I'm making clear to families early on is that conflict is the absolute worst thing going on in their family. Let's get rid of the conflict by getting rid of the expectations that are causing that conflict, and then start building up from there. Not giving in, not giving up, prioritizing, stabilizing. Huge. That leaves us with only 2. By the way, which would I rather use to stabilize a kid? Plan C or an atypical antipsychotic medication? Definitely Plan C. It has no side effects. Now, are there going to be kids who need medication for stabilization purposes despite implementing this model? Yes, but my experience is not anywhere nearly as many as were on stabilizing medication prior to implementing this model. That leaves us with only two other plans, A and B. Both represent a way to solve a problem with a kid. There's just one massive difference between them. With plan A, you're solving the problem unilaterally. With plan B, you're solving the problem collaboratively. I think you know which one we teach people in this model, B. Now, does that mean we are allergic to plan A? Not allergic, we just don't think it's a very good idea. But if a kid's about to dart in front of a speeding car in a parking lot, you're not doing plan C. Caregivers aren't thinking to themselves, you know, I've got bigger fish to fry here. So it's too late for plan B. I've noticed you have the caregiver do plan A. Yank on the kid's arm, save the kid's life, kid loses it, so be it. But if 3 weeks later, the kid is now darted in front of a speeding car in a parking lot 17 additional times, and you've yanked 17 additional times, yes, I would agree. Yanking is working at saving the kid's life, but yanking is not working at solving this problem. You're going to need a different plan, and it's going to be either B or C. How do you solve a problem collaboratively? There are 3 steps. And if questions don't take too long, I can show you a little bit of one of these steps. The first one, 3 steps are called, and this is what we're teaching caregivers and helping them do. This is it. Besides the ALSUP, this is what we are helping caregivers learn how to do. 3 steps: the empathy step, the define adult concern step, the invitation step. Now, I just want to make sure we're clear about what we've done already. Thanks to the ALSUP, plan B isn't happening in the heat of the moment. It's happening proactively because we want to make sure caregivers know, don't be late. We're going to help you be early. We're going to help get you out of the heat of the moment. Consequences aren't going to do that. Identifying and solving problems proactively and collaboratively is going to do that. What's the main ingredient of the empathy step? Information gathering. Gathering information from the kid so that we can understand what's making it hard for the kid to meet a particular expectation. How come they're having difficulty brushing their teeth before going to bed at night? How come they're having difficulty putting away the Xbox to come in for dinner? What's getting in the way? Now, I know we called it the empathy step, but the empathy step is actually not filled with empathic statements like, oh, that must be very hard for you. Nothing against empathic statements. The main reason this is called the empathy step is because listening is the purest form of empathy. Curiosity, gathering the information we need to understand what's been hard for this kid on this expectation, probably for about 5 years. That's what's going on in the empathy step. In case I don't have time to show you the video, let me give you an example of an empathy step. This is the example I frequently give when I'm not sure I'm going to have enough time to show a video. I was doing this podcast with this father maybe 5 years ago, and he did father's podcast, and he invited me to be on, and he was telling me about his 3-year-old daughter who was having difficulty brushing her teeth before going to bed at night, as fate would have it. And he told me that he already knew why his daughter was having difficulty brushing her teeth before going to bed at night. He was sure it was the taste of the toothpaste. So he's telling me this story. 8 to 10 different flavors of toothpaste later, he's telling me she's still having difficulty brushing her teeth before going to bed at night. His daughter was 3 years old, if I haven't said that already. So finally, he says to me, he finally did the empathy step. I thought this was fascinating because people often tell me they don't have time to do plan B. But I can promise you plan B is not going to take anywhere nearly as much time as 8 to 10 different flavors of toothpaste and having the problem remain unsolved. So here's what the empathy step sounded like. I've noticed you've been having difficulty brushing your teeth before going to bed at night. What's up? Here's what she said. When you brush my 3 years old, when you brush my teeth with the electric toothbrush, it gets water all over my face, and I hate getting water all over my face. I said to the father, well, now there's a concern 8 to 10 different flavors of toothpaste would never address. The define adult concern step. This is where adults are identifying their concerns. Adults have very important concerns as well. Regrettably, they have often been trying to get them addressed through use of Plan A, causing conflict, causing concerning behavior, and all that goes along with it. Now they're going to get that exact same concern addressed through use of Plan B. What might the father's concerns have been? My concern is that if we don't brush your teeth before you go to bed at night, you could get cavities. And it kind of hurts to get cavities filled. And to tell you the truth, I'd rather not have to spend the money. Father's concerns are now on the table. We are finally ready for the third step. And by the way, not a moment before. You are not ready for the third step until the concerns of both parties have been identified. The third step is called the invitation. This is where kid and caregiver are collaborating on a solution, but a solution that must meet two criteria. It's got to be realistic. It's got to be mutually satisfactory. Realistic meaning both parties can truly do what they're agreeing to do. Mutually satisfactory meaning the solution truly addresses the concerns of both parties. Here's what I've been saying a lot lately, and it's not just my work with thousands of kids and their caregivers that bears me out on it. It's world history that bears me out on it. If the solution is not realistic and mutually satisfactory, I promise you this problem is still unsolved. Here's what it sounded like. I wonder if there's a way, this is how the invitation always starts. I wonder if there's a way for us to make sure your face doesn't get wet when I'm brushing your teeth before you go to bed at night. That was the kid's concern. And also make sure you don't get cavities, because it kind of hurts to get cavities filled. And to tell you the truth, I'd rather not have to spend the money. Believe it or not, you are then giving the kid the first crack at the solution. Not because it's the kid's job to come up with the solution. It's y'all's job to come up with the solution. Y'all are partners. Y'all are teammates. If the kid doesn't have any ideas, I'm sure the caregiver will, but it is very good strategy. It lets the kid know beyond a shadow of a doubt we're actually interested in their ideas, and they usually do have ideas. This 3-year-old had an idea. She said, "Could you wrap a towel around my face before we start brushing my teeth before I go to bed at night, and then my face wouldn't get wet and I wouldn't get cavities?" Who won? Both. Who lost? Nobody. Whose authority was undermined? Nobody's. That father was being an authority figure. And that unsolved problem would never have been solved with a sticker chart, not durably, or through punishment. Food for thought. That's what we help families do when we're implementing this model. Now, just so you know, it's the ALSUP first. Then we're meeting with caregivers to help them understand the 3 plans and Plan B. The kid is not present for that. The kid is present for every other session after that, where we are, as the clinician, modeling Plan B for the caregivers so they can see what it looks like. We're telling them what we're doing at every step along the way. The kid is there for that. We can't come up with a solution without the kid, and we cannot come up with a solution without the caregivers. And then after a few of those, we are mostly transforming ourselves into coaches and having the caregivers do Plan B in our presence. And we're coaching them along to make sure they're getting it right. And we're helping them become increasingly independent in their use of the model. Once they are able to do the model without us, treatment is largely done. We do not send people home to do Plan B before they're ready. And now you know how we get them ready. Here's things that can help. Number 8, have more human moments. You know what's coming in. What's coming in often are caregivers who are quite stressed, quite frustrated, including frustrated with the mental health profession, sometimes frustrated as well by what's going on at school. some of them having a great deal of difficulty seeing their child's redeeming features. Where do I have most of my human moments these days? When I'm doing Plan B, and often with kids I've never met, because it's in Plan B where kids who I'm told aren't going to talk do talk. By the way, if we stop talking with kids about the concerning behavior and start talking with them about things they've been struggling with for a very long time, I find that even kids I was told weren't going to talk do. In fact, we have trouble getting them to stop. The empathy step is where kids have their concerns identified and understood. They are where us caregivers hear things we did not know. I'm always telling people, be ready in the empathy step, because you're going to find out that what you thought was getting in the kid's way is not what's getting in the kid's way. Plan B is where both kid and caregiver have voice. It's where solutions are arrived at to problems that have gone unsolved for a very long time. I have most of my human moments these days when I'm doing Plan B with kids, which means that not only are we solving problems, not only are we improving the kid's behavior, once again, because solved problems don't cause concerning behavior, only unsolved problems do. We are also improving communication. We are also improving relationships. Relationship building has been a very important focal point out there lately, and I think that's a good thing. But I think Plan B is going to build the relationship for you. But sometimes when people are building relationships, that alone is not going to solve any problems. Finally, things that can help, number 9. And I now know that we are not going to be watching any video today because I want to take our last 15 minutes or so with me answering as many questions as I can. The Lives in the Balance website is where you can get way more information about this model, all free resources. Got to put a little time into it. But the ALSUP is on the website. All the instrumentation of this model is on the website. There are free videos on this website showing you what Plan B looks like. So if you're willing to put the time in to gather the information and learn, this website is going to help you out. So check it out. One of my great sources of pride that, well, people have said to me, I don't know many model originators who are willing to give their work away for free, but that's usually because they haven't met this model originator. There's just a boatload of resources for you and for the families that you're working with on this website. Please make full use of it. There's the website again. I think we're ready for questions. Jackie, you're on again.
Thanks so much, Dr. Greene. This was an incredible presentation. And I think that we have a lot of questions. So I will say, I apologize in advance to everybody. We are not going to get to every question yet. I will do my best to sort of thematically pull and see if I can get ones that answer multiple questions at once. We had a number of folks that asked about working with children who maybe can't or won't verbalize what the issues are that they're being presented with. I feel like that both applied to, children who might be reluctant to share, but also there was questions specifically about children who maybe are less verbal for whatever reasons about that. So I was wondering if you could speak to that.
I had a feeling that question was coming because, well, that's the question. We have lots of strategies that I could spend a half hour on that. We have lots of strategies for kids who can talk but aren't. I'll talk about one of them, but there are many of them. The one we usually start with is this very basic 5-finger method. This is not rocket science. We teach the kid 5 fingers, but I sure do get a lot of information out of kids through my 5 fingers. 5 means very true. 4 means pretty true. 3 means sort of true, 2 means not very true, 1 means not true at all. I then make statements. And all the kids got to do is hold up fingers to let me know how true my statement is. Boy, do I get a lot of information that way. If 5 fingers is too much for the kid, we'll go with 3. If 3 is too much for the kid, we'll go with the usual 2. If fingers are not the kid's gig, we will write yes on one sticky pad and no on another. Notice I have props. Yes on one sticky pad and no on another. And all the kid, put them in front of the kid. All the kid's got to do is tap. I got to tell you, that gets a lot of information. We also have identified drilling strategies that I did not have time to go into. 8 strategies that we teach people that are really effective at helping elicit information from kids. So there's that. That's actually the starting point. Fingers is where we go when we're not getting anything from the kid. And once again, these are kids who can talk and aren't. I got to tell you, though, if you ask me really strategy number 1, it's stop talking with kids about their concerning behavior, which simply causes them to think they're in trouble, become defensive and stop talking, and start talking with them about things they've been struggling with for a very long time. That's going to get you most of them. That plus the drilling strategies, plus 5 fingers, I think we're going to be in good shape with, I don't know, 95% of kids who can talk and aren't. For the rest, bottom line is I'm just getting creative. And you know what? It's the 5% who everything I just described doesn't get me there. As you can tell, those are the ones who get me excited. Because now I'm either texting with them because they don't want their face to be seen, or I'm Zooming. I get a lot of information by texting kids, or Zooming with them with the camera off because they don't want their face to be seen. You name it. My attitude is, we need this info. Other models, you don't need the info from the kid so much because you're busy doing stuff to the kid. In this model, this is a do something with the kid. This is an ask the kid model. That's why we have developed all kinds of strategies for getting information from kids. What about the non-speakers? Kids who aren't talking because they can't. Lots of strategies there as well. We are often relying on how they are communicating now. Every kid communicates. There are many non-speaking kids who are using apps and pictures and assistive technologies, all of which we can incorporate into the 3 steps of Plan B. The ones who I am particularly intrigued by these days, and we're going to be launching a new page on the Life in the Balance for them, I would say that's 3 or 4 months off, are the kids who even those existing strategies don't get us there. Those kids intrigue me because we always find a way. If people watch the videos on the Lives in the Balance website now, they're going to see speaking kids providing us with information. That's probably not how it's going to look initially with a kid who's non-speaking. Sometimes we have to build in skills to to give them a way of communicating with us. But that's time worth putting in, because otherwise we're basically saying, well, this kid cannot participate in the process of solving the problems that affect their lives. They are relegated to adults doing things to them. I'm not going to do that to any kid. So more resources coming. Those are some of the things we apply to kids who are not participating even though they can, or aren't speaking because they can't.
That's so helpful. Thank you so much. I think we also got a number of questions about parents or caregivers who might be reluctant, not ready for not only like the model itself, but also for some of the sort of like attitude or like perspective shifts that come with the model. So, you know, this could be parents that are being like required to seek out help, but also, you know, parents that don't maybe want to go to classes, the sort of folks that said in the beginning, the parents who are like, this is your problem now, or just that are maybe reluctant to make some of those, you know, cognitive shifts, and sort of how you work with those families.
That's par for the course. I would say that's a given. I don't know many families at this point in human evolution for whom this model is not going to involve a paradigm shift. That's the norm. I got to tell you, the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems is quite the game changer when it comes to attitudinal shifts in caregivers. Now, in the parents who are court-ordered, there's other factors that come into play there. Bottom line is, I think we're going to have our best shot if we are empathizing with their situation, if we are feeling their pain, if they are feeling heard, and if they feel like we understand what they're going through and have something to offer them that is not the same old, we have a better shot at having people become engaged. And bottom line is, those are all the things that help anybody become engaged in treatment in the first place, right? If I'm seeking out treatment for some issue that I have, and I have a clinician who I don't think is listening very well, who I don't think understands what situation I'm in, who I don't think feels my pain, I ain't going back.
Yeah, I think a lot of, I'm hearing you sort of make reference to a lot of those sort of almost like motivational interviewing skills, right? You're not gonna, it's the, dancing with discord, you want someone to empathize with you. And if you're pushing back immediately against that, why go back at all?
Well, and I think what a lot of people want when they're coming into therapy, of whatever kind of therapy is hope. If they start hearing us talking about the stuff that hasn't helped them before, immediately, I'm not sure they're going to have hope. They got to have hope that there are options besides what they've been doing, besides what they've been hearing from everybody else up until now. I was resonating with something that came in the chat early on when we asked what are your greatest challenges with these families. And a lot of these families feel like the mental health profession has not helped them at all. The buck stops here.
Yeah. In the last couple minutes, I'm wondering, are there, there's some folks, and I'm trying to look through all of the comments that are saying that, maybe they've tried things like this and they found it hasn't been successful. And I'm wondering, are there populations that you find that this doesn't work with, or that maybe people more often feel like, this is not sufficient, or and sort of what recommendations do you have for folks who maybe are struggling or who are feeling like this isn't, they've tried a lot and it's not working?
I think that if this is applied casually, if it's not done systematically, if we don't take people as they come, if we don't meet families where they're at, there's a good chance that this, like every other form of treatment, is going to fall flat on its face. So this has to be incremental. We have to start, if they need it, if they're coming in hot, we have to start by stabilizing. We have to continue with the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems. If we simply jump straight into plan B with people, and then I'm not saying everybody on here is doing this, but the examples that I've seen where this doesn't work is when people skip over that early stuff, tell people about plan B and expect them to go home and do it. Good luck. There's a sequence of events by which we get, because this is so different for so many people, truly, we have to model it for them first. And that's actually 2, 3, 4 sessions, if we have that long. And by the way, hopefully we do have that long, because hopefully they're seeing this is different. My child is engaging. My voice is being heard in ways that other stuff I was taught didn't even have my voice being heard, right? My kid is responding to being heard. And then this is part of being systematic, coaching people along as they're trying it with their kid, so that we get out all of the stuff that old habits might bring to the table. If we're doing that, we have significantly greater chances of success. So, anytime I hear that the model's not working, I need the details, right? Yeah. Often it's one of those things that's missing. If you ask me, so when this model isn't going so well, what's often the number one factor? And sometimes meds come into play. There are kids and sometimes even caregivers who aren't able to stay regulated. And we have strategies for this as well. But ultimately, sometimes, and I hope as rarely as possible, we have a kid who's not going to be able to engage unless we get medicine on board. Not my favorite direction to go in, but there if I need it. I find that B and C are the norm for me, I don't know, without adding medication, 80 to 90% of the time, but medication is there if we need it.
Yeah. We had a number of questions about the role of doing this in terms of trauma and treating and I bring that up also because there was a number of questions about when the demands that or the expectations that are not ones that are necessarily controllable. I know that these are sort of almost two sorts of questions, but they're sort of were coming together in my head about sort of like, there are sometimes things externally that can't be changed, these demands, whether that is because of someone's trauma history or just because the world around them is inflexible. And so I'm wondering if you could sort of speak to either of those things and sort of how you've handled that with families in the past.
Well, if the world around them is inflexible, I need to go out to the world. If we're talking about school, yes, I'm showing up, at least by Zoom, to see if we can make sure that we're all on the same page. I've worked with New York City public schools. I know New York City public schools. I know not everybody on here is New York City public schools, but sometimes I have to use the IEP or the special ed process to induce flexibility. So I do what I got to do, but I do get involved because I don't want external factors upsetting the apple cart. Within a family, what was the first part of, oh, trauma. I don't know, most people refer to this as a trauma-informed model of care. But not every kid who has concerning behaviors has a trauma history. So, but if you said to me, so what's the last thing you would do with a kid with a trauma history? Power and control would be number one on my list. Making sure the kid has voice, making sure that the kid is engaged and has agency. That's what I would do with a kid who has a trauma history. I might do adjunctive therapies if they need it that are specifically related to their trauma. But I know what I wouldn't do with a kid with a trauma history, and I'm not going to re-traumatize the already traumatized. This is exactly what I would do with a kid with a trauma history, which is, I think, why I'm speaking at the National Trauma Conference in about a week. There you go.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate everyone. I'm sorry to those whose questions we did not get to, but as Dr. Greene said, you can find many more resources on livesinthebalance.org, his website. I really recommend you all look through there. There's so much great stuff on there. And also, please, if there's other topics related to this, or you'd like to have Dr. Greene come back, please let us know in your feedback survey that will pop up as you sign off. Again, you'll be getting emails regarding CEs in 2 to 3 business days. And that is also when you'll be able to find the slides and other related resources that will be posted to the CTAC website. That's ctacny.org. And thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Dr. Greene. This was a fantastic presentation. And I feel like a lot of folks are just putting in the chat how much they got out of it. And I really couldn't agree more. Thank you so much.
Good. Thanks for inviting me to do this. And thanks to everybody for taking time today to spend a little time with me.